Well, good morning, racing fans. Welcome to Pit Pass Live. We're here bright and early at the track in Speedway, Indiana, where the greatest spectacle in racing is soon to take place, the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. My name is Mackenzie Salmon, joined by our motorsports insider, Nathan Brown, and a very special guest we are going to interview here in a second, President of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Corporation, Mr. Doug Boles. From now until 10:30 a.m., we are going to be updating y'all on everything we see and hear down on the ground in terms of weather relation. We've got an amazing guest on the show, and of course, talk some fun storylines. But Mr. Doug, you just mentioned to us you haven't had much sleep. I can only imagine how stressed you might be right now, but it's got to be exciting. What's your pregame ritual for race day?
Well, my pregame ritual usually is not sleep, so that's good. I usually wake up Saturday and stay up all night, and then kind of get myself into a real mood and excitement because I hang out with the fans at night. Last night I did that, but then came back in early. We had an 11 o'clock weather call last night. We had a 4:45 this morning. So I usually write a letter to staff in the middle of the night, so I sent that about 1:25, and then I just kind of walk around, look at the place. But last night it's just really all been the weather, you know, and it's going to be a challenge for us today, and we're just trying to manage through that. But my ritual is really to get up Saturday morning and stay up until Sunday night. So I'm doing that. I'm just a little more tired today than I normally would be.
How different is this year's weather issues, unpredictabilities than you've had in the past? You mentioned in the press conference that we had this morning, we had a lot of concerns in 2019.
Yep.
Those concerns ended up being unfounded. We got the whole race in as scheduled. How is this year any different from any of these issues?
The lightning.
Yeah.
It's lightning. So in 2019, or if it was a normal year where it's just rain, you're not worried about that. But when you're worried about customer safety, that's when lightning really comes into it. And the challenge with it is you're trying to do everything you can to get the 500 in, because we have so many people who come in from out of town who want it to come in. If we're in town, we're like, it's okay, move it to tomorrow, but you have to balance both. So there's really not a great answer. So that lightning is the challenging factor for us, and also knowing that oftentimes in Indiana, things that are in Illinois, by the time they get here, are gone. So we're giving it the best opportunity we can. What we have to think about, because there's lightning, this isn't an 8-mile strike issue. This is, if we think it's coming and we're 50 miles out, we have to start thinking about getting people out of the grandstands, because there's so many people here, just to make sure that everybody's safe. And we're not a facility that has a tornado area or a weather area, so people have to kind of decide, do I want to go back to my car? Do I want to try and get under the grandstands? What are the places I want to go? So we want to give them as much time as possible to implement that plan that really works for them. So it's a challenge, and there's no good answer. I mean, this is one of those ones where I've told the team that there's no win situation for us here, other than just making sure everybody stays safe.
Yeah, the press conference I referenced, you spoke to a group of us in the media center at 6:20 this morning, so just about 2 hours ago. I just want to run through some of those nuggets that you told us at that point. You guys are expecting an update around 9:30 or 10 or so this morning. That's still the case?
So at 9:30, we're going to gather one more time with our weather people, with our internal ops people, with IndyCar, figure out where we are, what are we looking at. We're watching the scans, so we know how many people are actually in the venue right now. And then once we come out of that meeting, then we'll probably head over and give you guys an update of where we want to be. And I think at that point in time, we will know what do we want to do in terms of asking fans to get out of the grandstands. Is the lightning going to go away? So I think we'll have a much clearer picture, 3 hours-ish from what's scheduled to be the start of the Indy 500.
You said you guys will be notifying fans through the PA system. You guys will have the radar on the video boards throughout the track today. There's a text number that folks can message Indy 500 to. Can you give fans that number?
I don't know I can't remember the number off my head, but it's a mass communication number the city has. It is available on our website. I wanted to say it's like 6, 7 something, but there is.
I can picture the 5 numbers in my head. I can't put them in order.
I'm the same one. But the bigger, really just if you're in venue, just listen to PA, watch the video boards. Social media is something that you can follow. When you get this many people in one place, sometimes our cell service goes up and down, although we're a little better than we've used to been. So that's why it's really important for us on the PA and LSVD to make sure we're talking to people.
Yeah. And one of the last important things I felt like I took away from that is you want folks to make decisions about what they feel comfortable with, not necessarily wait for IMS to say to evacuate the stands, because they might be parked a mile, maybe even 2 miles away from the racetrack. You might have to get out of the track before you can even start walking there. So important for fans over the next couple hours to just monitor where they are, where they're going to be looking at the radar and figure out what makes the most sense for them to stay safe and comfortable this morning and moving into this afternoon.
I think that's exactly it. And a couple questions I didn't answer in that press conference that came up. I think folks are saying, okay, but if I'm already here, because we don't typically have pass outs, can I leave and come back? And in today's situation, we're absolutely letting people leave and come back. So if somebody was in right now and they said, you know what, I'm going to go back to my camper, my car, or whatever, and sit for a little while, take a nap, whatever it is you're going to do, you will be allowed to come back in. So that's one of the things that we're going to make sure that we take care of folks and give them that option to do that.
Yeah. Last weather note before I hand it back to Mackenzie. You said this morning also that the bright side is after this wave pushes through, we should have a window of a few hours, give or take, when the first one ends, the second one comes, to get some racing in. What is your latest take on what that window might look like, when we might be able to get back racing, assuming things go according to plan?
Well, it depends on what you're looking at, who you talk to and what you see, but it looks like, so if it's at 3 o'clock, say this storm that comes through ends, give ourselves a couple of hours to get the track dried. If we can be racing by 5 o'clock, that gives us enough time. Sunset's not till 9:02. It gives you enough time, if you think 3 hours is the average, maybe a little less than the average for the 500. That has us concluding around 8, gives us an hour of sunlight, and then even a little bit longer of dawn to get people out. So that's the next thing that we're up against, is making sure that we did this at NASCAR a few years ago. If you remember, we almost went to sunset. Less people there, so it was a little less of a concern, but you don't want to send people out into the streets in the dark with all the other things going on. So that's the other back-end challenge, as well as the second storm that they think might be coming, which they right now think will be stronger than the first storm. So it's just been one of those days of all these things. What's that?
When might that storm come?
So it depends on who you talk to, but anywhere from 6 to 10. Okay. So we'll know more of that as we go forward. So it's a day of watching weather and figuring out how we make sure we keep fans safe. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to end it on a good note. Your stepson,
yes.
Conor Daly,
yes.
is going to be joining our show very soon. So I'm curious, have you given him any pre-game advice? What are your conversations heading into the race? Or is there any little funny tidbit we need to bring up with him when he joins the show?
You know, I don't know there's really advice. This will be his 11th Indianapolis 500. He clearly knows this place, knows how to get around this place. He's with Dennis Reinbold and that team, I've known Dennis forever. And frankly, Conor there's a really cool photo that was in the Indianapolis 500 program when Conor was probably 8 or 9 years old, of Conor pulling a wagon with his brothers and in Indianapolis Motor Speedway merchandise, and Robbie Buell, who was driving for Dennis Reinbold at the time, in the wagon. And it's this really cool photo of him, and you look at that and you think, hey, when he started running the 500, it's like, wow, you ran the 500 from that ad. And now the fact that it's come full circle and there's that ad of Conor and he's actually driving for Dennis right now is a pretty cool thing for him. No, I just give him a hug, say I love him, and go have fun. I mean, I keep reminding him there's not a lot of kids that he graduated with in high school or his friends that get to do what they love every single day, and he loves this place more than anybody, and to see him race here is a pretty cool moment. Yeah. We did get to take him up yesterday for the flyover. He's obviously, as a race car driver, you never see it, so he's on the roof and got to see the flyover, and he looked over at me and said, I've already been crying twice. So he's a Hoosier. He's like Ed. There's a group of them that grew up and understand what it means, and he for sure, his dad raced here. He's stuck with me being his stepdad. He doesn't have a choice but to love the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As
we're monitoring the weather today, what communication will you have with the folks at Air McLaren? I know a big part of today is keeping track of Kyle Larson and hoping that he can do the double, yep. Wondering if he's going to race here or go to Charlotte. I know you've got a lot more important things on your hands, but how will you be just kind of monitoring where Kyle's going to be ultimately racing today and what that team decides to do?
So this may sound really terrible, but I haven't thought about Kyle Larson at all. This is the absolute first time I've even thought about him and the double and his challenges. My focus has really been on our event. I assume they're watching the weather as much as we are, and their decision will be their decision, and I hope that he stays, and I hope he's part of it. It's been really great to have him. Having Rick Hendrick here has been a lot of fun. They've been great to work with, but literally, until you just said that, I have not thought at all about how it was going to impact him.
That's fair. Well, we hope we get 500 miles or at least 101 laps in today, yep, to be able to have a winner crowned. Thanks so much for joining us today, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Stay awake, stay alert.
Stay awake's no problem. That's not an issue.
I just hope you can enjoy today a little bit. I know it was stressful, though.
I love seeing smiling fans and kids, and that's what gives me the energy to keep going when you run into those folks. So we'll keep going, and I know the fans will do whatever we end up doing, and I'll love the Indy 500 regardless. So that's what I appreciate the best. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Doug. And y'all, just like you said, make sure to keep up to date, get those alerts, get that communication, do what makes you feel safe. Well, Nathan, that kind of that was funny. He said he didn't have one thought about Kyle Larson.
I don't blame him when you think about everything that's on Doug's mind this morning, but that's also, I guess that puts into perspective just how much weather stuff is going on right now, how much uncertainty, Doug and the Penske Entertainment folks are making decisions that'll impact 300 and almost 50,000 people essentially here today. So big things to learn in the next couple hours. If we get any of those updates, we will be sure to give them to you.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you before Doug joined us live, could you give us a little vibe about what's going on right now? How was your morning? What time did you end up waking up?
So I woke up around 2:30 this morning. Actually had planned to get up a little bit earlier. I had some transcribing I wanted to catch up on, just with some quotes that I want to have on hand for today, depending on who wins, what the storylines are once we actually get cars on the track. Also was staying up to watch the end of the Pacers game last night. So as I know you were as well, we were kind of burning the candle at both ends. Tough ending there for Pacers fans, as we have Roger Penske, Greg Penske, and Penske Entertainment folks driving by us. It was an early morning, not a whole lot of sleep, but excited to be here. Once we get, once you pull in, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's weather or uncertainty about today, there's just a certain vibe about this place in race day morning, from the cannon going off at 6 a.m., watching the cars file in. You see the snake pit stage start to light up and hear the music going. It's unlike anything else, and it's a really fun place to be.
I know. I told you this, but I'm a little embarrassed. I'm a born and raised Hoosier, but this is my first Indianapolis 500. It's been fun. It's lived up to the hype so far, and the race hasn't even started yet. So I'm excited for it to get to that point. Fingers crossed, weather passes over us. But here in a little bit, we are going to have another guest on the show. But before we do, I want to talk some top storylines with you. Obviously, weather, we got that one out of the way. But for you, second top storyline, what would that be?
I think as we ended things with Doug, I think it's watching what Kyle Larson does today. As we've spoken with Rick Hendrick, the head and the owner of Hendrick Motorsports, Kyle's NASCAR team, along with Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, earlier this week, they essentially told us that the decision on what Kyle does today lies with Rick and Rick alone. Rick is a partner on this number 17 Chevy with Kyle, with Arrow McLaren, with Zach and McLaren. He's also the sponsor on the car. HendrickCars.com is the primary sponsor. So all of this and what Kyle does is essentially up to Rick. Now, the complication for those of you that maybe haven't been following this along so closely, NASCAR's playoff rules require all drivers and all teams to have their car or their driver run every single race in order to be eligible. Now, to make the playoffs, you either have to win a race during the regular season, of which Kyle has already done, or make it in on points. So the complication in all of this, Hendrick will have a driver run this car regardless. I can't remember who their stand-in driver is, but they've already selected that person. So that number 5 Chevy in the Cup Series will run today at Charlotte Motor Speedway. That race is set to kick off at 6 p.m. The decision they will have to make, especially if this race gets delayed to around 4:30 or 5 p.m. as we're expecting, is whether they hold Kyle here and have him run the 500 or get him to Charlotte to run the race that he's scheduled to run and what they've said is his priority. The question on all of that is whether NASCAR will give them a waiver to allow Kyle to still compete in the playoffs this year. They've not had to do that before when it comes to a driver just not missing a race for a non-health related reason. So we've had guys miss because of concussions or broken legs or broken arms, but never just essentially choosing not to come to the race. So that NASCAR hasn't given an inclination on what decision they would make on that. There are a lot of reporters keyed into that series that think NASCAR would ultimately give Kyle a pass, but we don't know that yet. And so if you're Rick Hendrick making this decision, you have to weigh whether you put NASCAR in an uncomfortable position and make them make a decision on your playoff opportunities and have Kyle run the 500 that is such a unique opportunity, or play it safe and send him to Charlotte. Their drop-dead time where they need to be headed to their helicopter that then takes them to the airport today is 4:15. So that will likely be before cars are even rolling, but we should have a picture of what today's racing plans will be at that point.
Yeah, and he can't miss the Coca-Cola 600.
It depends on whether they want to put Kyle's playoff hopes in NASCAR's hands, essentially.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they decide on that, how important it is to have Kyle run the 500 in this unique opportunity. They've noted that this could be a multi-year deal, so Kyle could potentially be back here. This might not be his only opportunity to run the 500 with Aero McLaren, but you never know. Those papers are not signed, so we will be waiting and seeing over the next couple hours once we get a full picture of the weather to see what Rick Hendrick decides to do next.
Yeah. I want to ask you a few questions about Carb Day the other day, where we got to talk to some of the drivers. What were your biggest takeaways from that? I know the placing was a little bit different, but what was your biggest takeaway from Carb Day?
Yeah, so we got a chance to talk to Scott Dixon afterwards. Yep. He finished with the top one-lap speed on Carb Day. Yep. He had qualified, I think, down in 21st this year, which is the lowest place that the 2008 500 winner has started in his career. So there are a lot of questions about that Ganassi team and how competitive they're going to be this year. Scott feels a lot better about his race car this year, as do I think a lot of the Ganassi drivers compared to where they qualified. I think the top qualifying Ganassi car was Alex Palou in 14th. Mm-hmm. So we saw Joseph Newgarden win this race last year from 17th, so it's not impossible for someone to carve their way through the field, get some breaks on where the yellow flags fall, and try to make it to the front, but that's not certainly easy. Scott said, I think we have a great car, but I think we also have 20 pretty good cars ahead of us as well. So it will be tough to for them to ultimately be up there. You want to be in that top 3, top 5 once we get to essentially the final stint, the final 30 laps or so, assuming this is a 200-lap race at least. We don't know that yet, depending on weather, but it will be interesting to see if Scott can factor into this race, still make it up to the front. Whether he can win this race might still ultimately come down to the speed in that car, and as we saw on qualifying weekend, the Ganassi cars and the Honda cars at large were a little lacking on that end, so we'll see where they can factor in, if they can factor in. It's been several years now, and we've always had a Ganassi car up there at the end. Obviously, Marcus Ericcson won in 2022.
Before we open the show, or as soon as we open the show, I was going to have you give us a little rundown of some of our guests. Up next, we're going to have AJ Foyt, Santino Ferrucci. But could you tell our viewers a little bit about what they can expect on the show today? Yeah,
so we'll have Santino Ferrucci, who finished third in last year's 500, started last year in 4th, and starts this year in 6th. His garage is right across from us, so we're looking forward to having Santino on here soon. We will follow with, as I mentioned, the 2022 winner, Marcus Ericcson, who's had an interesting couple of weeks, going from winning in 22, finishing in 2nd and thinking he was going to have a chance to win last year, and now starting in 32nd. So it'll be really interesting to talk to Marcus. We'll follow that up with chatting with our columnist at the IndyStar, Greg Doyle, about some of the things he's watching today here at the 500. We will then transition into talking to Conor Daly from Brian Reinbold Racing at 9:20 or so. And then we'll cap off our guests with Aero McLaren team principal, Gavin Ward. Really interested to talk to Gavin, as we mentioned, about what it's been like these last couple weeks to have Kyle Larson, that 2021 Cup champ, with them, having the first chance to have someone do the double in 10 years. And then we will just see where the show takes us, what we learn from updates from IMS about weather, and if we need to shut things down a little bit early to get inside.
Yep. Helio Castroneves. Huge storyline that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. So he finished 2nd in practice in Carb Day, obviously a 4-time winner. What are his chances of getting his 5th this year?
Yeah, he's kind of in that same boat as Scott Dixon. Actually, interestingly enough, starts on the same row as Scott. I think he starts 20th, and Marco Andretti starts 19, another veteran. So those guys in that 18 to 24 range, maybe you could still see with a great car they have a chance to move up the field, but it's going to take a lot with how many strong cars that we have this year. I was running through before, and I would say I wouldn't be super surprised if we have any one of probably half the field win this race. It's an incredible amount of depth, and it would take a lot for Elio, but I know this crowd, having been here in 2021 to cover his 4th win, this crowd would be, I think, unlike any we've seen here. If we had a 4-time winner win his 5th set history, he would be of course, the only one in Indy 500 history. We have 4-time winners after Elio won in 2021. We're waiting and seeing if we ever get a 5-time winner, but Elio is the only one that has a chance to do that. And with a handful of 1-time winners and only a couple 2-time winners active right now, I don't know when we're going to have someone approach that again. So as long as we have Elio here, it's always going to be really exciting to see if he can win that next one.
I know. We were asking drivers the other day, who's your GOAT driver? And a lot of them said him. And when we mentioned it to him, of course, he was very humble about it. But we've got our next guest joining us, AJ Foyt's Santino Ferrucci. Hello, man. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Man, you clean up nice.
Thank
Look
you.
At that.
Appreciate it.
Nice to meet ya.
Race day.
I know. You got a large contingent outside your garage.
Tons of fans
Looks like a lot
following
going on
you.
over there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Santino, how are you feeling, man? I mean, what's your confidence level going into this? What's the day been like so far for you?
Man, it's been awesome. I got to sleep until like 7:30 this morning, which is
Lucky.
nice. Just waking up, getting my day going. I mean, as you can tell, our garage is a madhouse, but it's nice being. This is where it's nice being short. I can just walk through everybody completely unnoticed. And but yeah, no, I'm just ready to get this rain out of the way, and so we can go green.
How does we heard Doug talk to us this morning, kind of about what they're looking at with the weather plans, thinking that we're almost certainly not going to start as scheduled at 12:45. Hopefully, maybe start at 4:30 or so. When you have to start kind of changing your schedule, your process of getting ready by several hours, and don't really know when we're going to get going. What's that like for you right now, just from a mental perspective?
I think I'm gonna miss my dinner reservation.
Fair. I think you probably will.
No, I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I'm pretty stoked that we're just getting it in today. I'd say it'd be a little bit different if we were to start the race and then finish it tomorrow. I think it's hard to kind of sleep on something like that. But no, I think they're gonna make the right call today, and it's gonna be a lot of fun for the fans. So I just hope everyone stays safe out there. It looks like a lot of lightning, so it'd be quite interesting to see 400 people be moving around.
I know.
So we're fortunate we get to hang out in the garage, get to spend a little bit more time with my pups and my friends.
Sure.
And yeah, it's gonna be good.
A time lapse of this place today would be really interesting to see everyone coming in, leaving, and then coming back in again. I know we oftentimes see just kind of what happens over a normal couple of hours, but that would be very different today.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of weeks, you've been riding a little bit of a roller coaster. Had another strong qualifying weekend for AJ Foyt Racing. You'll start on the outside of row 2 and 6, but I know your race car hasn't always maybe been where you've wanted it to be. Kind of take us through what these weeks have been like and trying to get that race car in the window to be ready to compete today.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's been really stressful, right? So we started off our month of May kind of on the wrong foot here. We had a miscommunication on what we were doing with setup. So that kind of killed our first day at 4 hours of practice. And then once we got it going, we kept trying to we had a close race car, and every time we make changes, we'd go the wrong direction. We were kind of like, all right, this is confusing. So when we ended Thursday, which is when everyone finished up race practice before we go into Carb Day, or Fast Friday rather, we had no idea what we had. It was like, this is not, I was like, well, we just got to drop what we're doing and go to Q. And our Q car was good, no issues. When we got back to Monday's practice, we actually felt really, really strong. Broke down the cars, rebuilt them, went back out there Friday, and we just had a ton of issues. So, I mean, we had an issue with the floor, with the rear toe, with the aero balance. So we barely ran. So we didn't really get to tune on it much. So we made adjustments based on 20 minutes of running to go into today, which is now 15, 20 degrees colder.
Yeah.
So we're kind of.
And you don't know when we're going to start. You could have maybe mapped out that we were going to start at 12:45 today. Now we'll probably start at 4:30.
Oh, I know, exactly. So it's just kind of well, we're going to throw the dart at the board one last time. Hope we hit the triple 20s and go out there and drink some milk.
Fair. What do you feel like your chances are of factoring in today? You were in that group of 3 down the stretch last year, had a yellow fallen at a different time or not had maybe a last red, you might have had a chance to make passes on Marcus Ericcson and Joseph Newgarden to take that win. Knowing the unpredictability of your race car, what do you feel like your odds are of repeating that or even going a spot or two further?
Yeah, I think our car has a lot of raw speed, which is great. I do think that the balance is better than last year. No matter how much we're adjusting it a little bit. Penske has helped us, with some of our dampers and stuff like that. So I do feel more confident in the car. I do think that if we run our race, mind our P's and Q's, don't have any hiccups, we'll be there in the end. I do think that the way that you've seen this year, there's been a lot more crashes, a lot more open practice crashes. That has to do with the slight tire change in preparation of the hybrid. So it's just going to be a game of survival, and I think with the later start, everybody's just going to be a little bit more antsy. I might go take a nap, but I think if we survive to the end, we'll be in the hunt.
Yeah. You mentioned that technical alliance that you have with Team Penske this year. It started, I think, late last year. It started in earnest for the start of this season. That's been a lot of talk about what you guys have been learning, what they've been learning, how much they have or haven't been learning from you guys, which I know is brought up again on Thursday during Media Day. I spoke with Michael Cannon the first day of practice to kind of get a sense on how this all came together. Maybe kind of take me through again your own sense of how this has worked, how you guys have benefited, and how you feel like that technology and idea exchange has worked.
Yeah, obviously for us on the road and street course program, it's been amazing. We were 10th in the championship coming into the GP before we had some issues in the race. As far as the speedway stuff goes, it's not just Cannon. It's a couple of people that, we showed them the way of, setups, yeah. So setups are a big thing. Setups don't make a car go fast around here. Setups a balance adjust for a driver to be comfortable. What makes a car goes fast is things that we can't talk about. And my engineer will tell you, who works is a Penske engineer, tell you that, the success of the qualifying, those guys put in and built a phenomenal race car over the winter time. Their car is beautiful, but that speed average is not just from them and all of them. But, that's how I see it. That's how we see it here. But I am on their dampers this weekend. I am racing their dampers. I do prefer the feeling of them, but they're not tuned from their cars. They're built for my setup and my car. So, it's a very interesting alliance. And I will say it is nice to have 3 additional, I wouldn't say teammates because we don't really talk with them and debrief with them, but I do get to kind of see what their driver notes are and see what direction they're going with their cars and, how that they're thinking on a, standpoint from an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
So it is helpful for me to make decisions, to have to have that in my back pocket, because I didn't have that last year. It was, I felt like it was kind of just me because I had a rookie teammate. Yeah. And, you can't help that. So it's nice to have some guys with a ton of experience and, like I said, I love following what Will does. He knows how to get around this place pretty well.
Sure does.
So, Santino, you started racing at such a very young age. Was there any one person who really inspired you or moved you to want to get into racing?
Man, when I grew up, I was a huge Schumacher fan. Without a doubt, loved Schumi. And then on the IndyCar side, the reason why I'm honestly in IndyCar is Dan Weldon. So, it's wild to think, but, from go-kart races and seeing him there, it was so eerie a few years ago. His kids, when I met Dan, I was about his kids' age.
Wow.
So yeah, I know. So it was cool experience for me. But it's mainly those two guys, and just I never thought that I'd ever be an IndyCar driver growing up, and I'm so happy that I'm here, and I'm so happy that I'm about to compete in my 6th one. So I feel good about it.
What's it like seeing Oliver and Sebastian now in race cars themselves? That's got to be a weird, that puts a timestamp on maybe how old you are or how much time has passed.
You calling him old, man?
I know. Old at 25. I'm sure we'll be in IndyCar together at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I see Sebastian, I believe it's Sebastian on iRacing all the time.
Yeah.
That dude's like a freak of nature. I mean, the second I see him in my session, I'm like, I'm top 5 quite often. I'm like, nope. I'm just going to leave. I was like, the dude's just freak of nature. I'm excited to see what both of them can do coming up to the series. Obviously they've been winning a lot. So I'm sure they'll be in IndyCar in no time. But like I said, it's just exciting to see that progression for those kids and, to carry on Dan's legacy.
Well, Mr. Santino Ferrucci, we are pleased to have you on. Good luck today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the show.
Yeah,
Stay
dry.
Santino. Yeah,
you too, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Great meeting
Thanks for
you.
joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Santino.
you. Thank you. All right, well, before we get our next guest on the show here, I do want to bring it back a little bit to more of us regular folk time. So, Nathan, what's the fastest speeding ticket you've ever gotten?
You were asking me that before we started, and I'm trying to think back. I haven't had one in several years. I want to say it's somewhere around 15 over when I was living out in Southern California. Nothing like too terrible, but also something that if you drive by a cop, you see the lights on, you know you're deserving of it.
Right. No, me too. I haven't had one in a while. Praise the Lord. It's been a while. But media day a few days ago, I kind of wanted to be like, how fun would it be to ask these drivers their fastest speeding ticket? So we are going to throw it. Actually, before we get into that, we've got our next guest on the show. Welcome.
Marcus.
How's it going,
We have got Andretti Global's Marcus Ericcson and the 2022 Indy 500 winner here with us. So, man, have the emotions of the race kicked in yet? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, race day morning is always something special, right? There's something about it that's hard to describe unless you're here. The energy, the atmosphere, seeing all the people, it's just special. So I'm excited. I woke up with that bomb going off at 6 a.m. and then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go.
Here we go.
Did you know that was happening your first 500? Did someone tell you to expect that ahead of time, or did that catch you by surprise?
I don't remember if someone told me, but I do remember waking up and being like, what is going on here? But then it's like, okay, this is Indy 500.
Yeah. Well, I know it's been an up and down couple weeks for you. You come in, you win in 2022, second last year. Had just kind of an up and down, issues in practice and qualifying, and we'll get to more of those later. But how are you feeling right now? I know you had really, really high hopes of what this year could be. You'd be starting 32nd. How is this race day morning different than the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a bit different. In some ways, it's less pressure,
Sure.
Because we're starting from the back. Like you said, we've had a really challenging few weeks here. But in some way, it's sort of giving us a lot of strength as well, that we've been, pulling through it all, and we made the field, and then we had a couple of good practice sessions this week that really have felt really good. Friday was a really good day for us, so I'm going in with a lot of confidence. Like, I know what I need to do in the race here. I know what I need to feel from the car, and I felt that on Friday. So I'm sort of very excited for the challenge, right? Like, the other years I've been here, I've been more like just hanging out in the front and just, waiting for the last 20 laps to happen kind of thing. Whereas now it's like, all right, it's go time. We're going to overtake a lot of cars. We're going to move forward. It's going to be a lot of fun for me, to be honest.
Your first 500 in 2019 was a year maybe somewhat similar in the morning. I know we were expecting rain that morning. Ultimately, it didn't come. But when you're sitting race day morning, not really knowing what to expect from a schedule standpoint, when you're going to start, how many laps you're going to get in, what was that like then, and how is it kind of compared to right now?
I think back then it was just a blur. I was just so like...
That's true. That was also your first 500.
Exactly.
So.
It was my first 500. So I don't even... Yeah, it was just a blur, the whole experience. I was so blown away by it all. But no, I mean, today, of course, it's not ideal that I would love it to be blue skies and sunshine. It would be great, but we can't really do much about it. So we just have to wait and see, be ready to go whenever. I just wish we get those 200 laps in, because I need every one of them to get to the front. So that's my biggest thing. If it happens, on time later today or even tomorrow, I don't really mind so much, because I need all of the laps, and I'm sure we'll get it in at some point today. I really believe we do.
It's what it looks like. We had Doug Boles on earlier, and he was talking to us about how likely to start somewhere maybe around like 4:30 or 5 after this, assuming this wave that we're expecting does hit us and comes through. And then the hope is that the next band that could arrive as early as 6, maybe as late as 8 or 9, comes in on that later end. And as long as you've got 3 hours or so, we should be able to get this race in. One thing I was curious about, with you starting that far back, would you guys consider maybe gambling more on strategy if say for example, we're not sure if we're going to get all 200 laps in? Do you roll the dice and say, we started 30 seconds. If this doesn't work and we finish back around there, we didn't lose a whole lot, but maybe we do something that's totally off script and gives us a chance if yellows and rain fall the right way?
Yeah, I mean, we actually had a meeting just before I came here, a strategy meeting where we were discussing different things. I think for us, thinking it will be a 200 lap race, I don't want us to gamble because I still think it's enough time and laps to get to the front, doing a straightforward race, not doing any mistakes, doing good stars, restarts, pit sequence. We have time, and we even have like a schedule where like on lap 25 we need to be here, on lap 50 we need to be here, on lap 75 if you follow that schedule, by half race we need to be P17. So like it's not like we need to overtake 15 cars and start gambling on like lap 40 yellow. We don't have to like start doing crazy stuff. But of course, if we're running in the back and we see there's rain coming, then it's, like you said, then we might be the guys that should roll the dice and try something. If you're running up front at that point, you want to stay out. But yeah, in a scenario where we see rain is on its way, then maybe that's a play you can do.
Marcus, one thing I really admire about athletes is the mental toughness y'all have to have, especially when you're out there for more than an hour nonstop. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much control you have to have over your emotions and your mental toughness. So could you just talk about how you center yourself when something arises? I know you had a crash during practice. How do you center yourself during that? You must have been really relieved to make the field.
Yeah, it was a tough last few weeks because first of all, the crash, one of my biggest crash, if not the biggest crash I've had, and that shakes you up quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And then you have to go to a backup car, and I had to get in that backup car. It was not dialed in. It was really hard to drive, and you try and build yourself up and the team up again in a way. So it's tough. It was a tough mental challenge for me. It seemed like the last 3 years I've been having like the toughest mental challenge that's possible around this place. Especially sitting on pit lane waiting for you to go out. It's almost harder. Like when you're out on track driving, it's like when you're doing something, you're in the rhythm, you're sort of just in automated mode, versus like on Sunday on the last chance shootout there, to have to sit for half an hour and wait and knowing that, okay, I need to go out and deliver and execute my perfect run. That mental challenge to stay in your bubble, to not let all the thoughts that's trying to get into your head get into your head. That was really a really tough one. But there again, it comes from, like I worked a lot with mental toughness, mental trainers throughout my career, and I had to use all those tricks to really stay there, stay present, and stay focused. But like you said, this thing, you're gonna see today 33 drivers that all are amazingly talented, super skilled. Like we're all very good race drivers, but it's the mental side, I think, that will decide who will win and who will not.
Do a little meditation in the car.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, getting your zen zone. So.
Yeah, exactly.
When you you made the mistake that I think was covered on the qualifying broadcast, you ended that first run 1 lap too early, and then you had to sit for 30 minutes and either dwell on that or put it behind you, and then as you mentioned, literally you had one opportunity to put together 4 perfect laps that would get you in this race. How did you deal with that letdown and recovering from that, and then ultimately putting 4 laps that could get you in this race?
Yeah, like I said, it was probably my toughest mental challenge I've had in my career. I didn't really dwell so much about the mistake. It happened. I didn't talk about it with the team much. I just said to them, yeah, look, I messed up. Let's try and focus on what we can do about the situation, and we can discuss that after. So that we moved past that stage. We moved past almost instantly. And then it was about focusing on what to do for the next round. The problem we had on Sunday was that it was 90-something degrees. It was so hot out. So the car was so overheated after that first run. So we knew we would lose like half to 1 mile an hour in speed just from the heat soak. So it made a really tough situation knowing that we had to find speed. So we had to trim the downforce, and the temperature kept going up on the outside. The track kept getting hotter, so it made it really tough. And I knew I had to go out and really execute a perfect run, because all it takes is one corner. You have a bit of a washout or a bit of a moment. You lift out of the throttle, and then you're gonna be out of the race. So it was really tough. But in a way, it brought me back to the last 2 years when I was sitting on pit lane trying to win this race and sitting and waiting, and the sort of mindset I had then, and sort of believing in myself, believing in my ability, knowing that I can do it, knowing that I can execute when I need, and again, being able to do that, I think gives you so much strength. So like now going into today's race, I'm like, I can do this. I have the strength to really go through the field and fight for it. So that's the thing, you can always get challenges and things go against you, but it's how you react to them and how you execute during them that really defines you, I think.
One last question for you. Say you win again. What's your first celebratory thing you're doing, other than drinking the milk? What are you going to do to celebrate?
I don't know. I mean, I have my family here, my wife, my mom and dad, my brother. So I have a lot of family and friends here. So I think that's the biggest thing, to celebrate with the closest ones. That was the thing for me when I won in 22. I have so many memories from that, just like celebrating and seeing the happiness on all the people I love. That was the biggest thing probably, on top of all the tradition things that you get to do. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing that here a bit later, so let's get it on.
Cool. You drinking 2% whole milk?
No,
what
whole
milk you drinking?
whole milk.
Whole milk, okay.
Yeah,
I heard buttermilk is something somebody asked for once.
That's the tradition, but now
we can't get it anymore.
I know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Good luck with everything. We really appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marcus.
Enjoy the race.
Bye.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you so good. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Hi. You and gone?
Yeah. All right, we're joined by IndyStar's sports columnist Greg Doyle. Greg, thanks for joining us this morning here on Pit Pass Live.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
So as we come into this race, I guess the first thing I'm curious about, so many things to follow. You're here wanting to follow kind of the top stories of what's going on. What things do you have your eyes on today?
Well, Kyle Larson. And I've been fascinated by, and I didn't know this, I'm not a NASCAR expert, I'm an IndyCar expert, but I didn't know how good he was. Like, I know he's good. I didn't know that. I mean, you keep getting quotes, and you've been getting the quotes. Oh, he's a top 3 to 5 driver I've ever seen. Like, Jeff Gordon said that.
Yeah.
So apparently he's just a savant, so I'm really curious to see what he does. But otherwise, we cover sports in large groups. The Star does. Pacers game, you, me, whatever. And I always tell folks, they ask me, what are you going to write so they can maybe stay away from it? And I'm like, I'm writing this. I'm writing this. So I don't even know the whole thing, everything. There's a guy with a hot dog over there. I'll probably talk to him in a minute.
So, your pregame ritual, how do you get ready for race day?
Well, I don't sleep much.
That's what Doug said earlier.
Doug said he didn't sleep at all. I hope you at least got a little bit of rest.
I think I got 5 hours.
No,
maybe.
I can see Doug. I mean, yeah. The Pacers played last night.
I know.
I was there.
It's tough. And then I've got a dog. I got to walk in the morning. My dog, my cap. Follow me on Instagram if you want dog pictures. But yeah, this is just it's a slog. Really, it's a slog. You get here at 7 a.m. Got here at 7, 6 hours before the race starts. The media lot was full. Yeah. And the media lot is large. So I'm parking with the commoners, which means the commoners are parking with me, and I feel really bad for them, but they are. So then it's a matter of how much coffee can I drink until the race starts. But the funnest part for me is walking on the track when they allow us on before the race, and the cars are all lined up. And they just look like really large Matchbox cars that I played with as a kid. I mean, they don't look real. It's hard to imagine that thing is going to go 240. That's mind-blowing to be right there. And every now and then I walk by and I might put a little fingerprint on there. So I don't know if I'm slowing down somebody. My smudge just slowed you down.
I know. They're all polished up. They really, like, I don't know how to describe it or what it is, but they just look different in practice when they're in the garages versus when they're out there on race day. I don't know if they use a special polishing thing to get them all ready for the race, but it is very interesting.
Well, you get caught up in the atmosphere too, the sun and the people, and you just kind of realize this is really happening. This is happening.
What moment of the pre-race cadence really kind of gets you going? Is there a part that you kind of always get to in the hour or so lead up to the race where it really starts to kind of set in of what we're about to experience?
For me, it's the flyover. The flyover is just we're in the media tower over there, and there's big glass windows, so you can see the track. You can kind of look up a little bit and see the sky, and I'm always out there looking up, and it's hard not to get a little choked up. I'm an emotional type anyway, so I'll cry at the drop of a hat, but it's hard not to get choked up when you see that, and you know that there's 300,000 people. You can hear them cheering, for America, for us, for the moment, whatever, and it's that is I'm getting chills. That is my favorite. There's my hair standing up. That is my favorite moment of the day. Until the flag drops, and then all of a sudden, and they're like snakes doing this, and I think it's great.
Yeah, for me, it's back home again in Indiana. Just being a native Hoosier, that always really hits me. I'm interested to see, Mackenzie, you being a native Hoosier, this is your first 500, what that is like for you. It's hard to really describe just the pomp and circumstance, the emotions, the silence followed by roars of clapping and cheering and the flyover. I'm excited to see how you experience that and what that's like for you today.
I know I really can't wait. So far the buildup has been amazing.
This is your first one?
Yes, sir.
It's one of those things that you have to do it once. Everybody says
exactly.
But then once you do it once, well, then you got to do it twice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then I might as well do it 3 times. I'll just keep coming back until they tell me I can't come anymore.
Yeah.
I've covered Super Bowls, finals games, but to think that 350,000 people are going to be here, that's mind-blowing to me.
Today, this is the second largest city in Indiana. It's mind-blowing.
Lord.
Inside, literally inside the gates. It's wild to think about. Doug mentioned that in a press conference on Wednesday. It's easy to forget, but it's a great way to put into perspective how many people are here.
And also, their first time here, you look out there, there's a golf course out there. There's
what I said.
And I saw some graphic where they could put 18,000 Jerry Worlds inside this facility, and there's it's shocking how large it is, and I'm still not used to that. I'll never get used to it.
I think maybe I don't know if it was the Pacers or IMS yesterday posted 32 Gainbridge field houses that you could fit inside, literally in the infield or around the track. It's, I don't know.
Ridiculous.
You could make a whole weird. You can come up with some really weird combinations of what you can fit in here.
And 14 billion cans of beer, and they do that every year. Actually.
Just about, as you will see on Monday morning when the folks come out here to clean everything up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Nathan and I are going to talk predictions towards the end of the show, but I want to know for you, who do you think is going to come in first, second, and third?
I think Alexander Rossi is. We've seen him win. I think he's a savant. I think he's a guy. I think he's a big race guy. Some people can just turn it on when they have to. He turns it on here, and he is ticked off. Alexander Rossi is already mad. He's starting the race mad. He's mad at Penske. He's mad that they got the front row. He's mad they cheated or whatever we're calling it. He's mad at all of it. Alexander Rossi mad is a scary, scary person behind the wheel because he's going to do some things. He's going to do some dangerous stuff out there. He's going to get away with it because he's Rossi. He's that good. So he's my guy.
He's your guy.
Second and third, who do you think is going to be battling with Rossi for the win here down the stretch?
Will Power to me has that look on his face. He always does, and that face scares me too. But him and Larson, I like Larson. I just love Larson. It's why I'm bad at mock NCAA brackets. I'm terrible at brackets because I always go with who do I want to win, or more importantly, who do I want to lose, and you know who you are. But I want Larson to do well. I want him to do well. Therefore, I think he will do well. We'll see. But it's fun to be. I get to be a fan here. I don't get to cover the Colts and Pacers and be a fan. I want our city to do well. Yeah. It's good for me if the Pacers are in the playoffs, but I'm not a homer on a day-by-day basis. But here, I'm just a fan watching all these guys race. It's awesome.
Cool.
Well, man, we appreciate you joining. Good luck. Hopefully the rain passes over us. You stay dry.
Well, I got to go have my 9th cup of coffee now.
Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Thank you. Well, guys, up next we have Dry and Rainbow Q6. Conor Daly joining us. He will be here very soon. I'm excited. This dude is a Twitch streamer. He's got his own podcast.
He does a little bit of everything. He races. He'll be able to explain. But it's he races rally cars. He over the fall and earlier this year. He kind of just does a little bit of everything. He ran the Daytona 500 last year in 2023. He's got a really interesting racing story, and it's awesome to still have him back here at the 500, even though we know he's not running full time in IndyCar here this year. So he's with a great teammate, Ryan Hunter Ray, who won this race in 2014. And we'll hear about that more with Conor Daly as he joins us right now.
In the suit. Look at you.
What's up? How we doing?
Good.
Good.
How are you doing, more importantly?
Great. I think, yeah. I mean, we'll see.
We were just talking
Looks
about you
perfect
being
right now. Honestly, this is great.
I know,
racing
if it can stay
weather.
like this.
Yeah.
If we could get going right now, I know that's impossible, but if we could have started at 9 a.m., it might have been okay.
Yeah, it does look like we'll get it in today, though. So
Yeah.
You don't think we'll get into 101 laps?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I just look at big green things on the screen, and I'm just like, I don't care. Let's just go.
Right.
Fair.
Rain doesn't exist on Sundays.
So your stepdad told us a few stories about you.
Okay.
There was a photo of you apparently in a little, what was it, a wagon?
You were like 8 years old
Yeah,
with
8 years old, that full
Brian
circle
Reinbold back like well before you started racing cars. That may have been in like a program way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember it. Yeah, definitely in that little red wagon. I think there are a couple other kids in there that are definitely in the racing family as well, which is kind of funny. I forget who, but a couple different children of names that you would know in the sport. Yeah.
So just kind of come full circle here with you getting a chance to now race with Brian Reinbold Racing.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is I feel like I always paid attention to Dennis's team because, like, I really enjoyed the people that drove for him. You know, whether it was like the Mike Conways of the world, the Dad's Root Beer car. You know, you had Thomas Schechter as well. You know, there are a lot of good guys that, like, you know, had fallen out of the top teams, but like Dennis was right there, so it was like really cool to see, and they would always do well. So, you know, there was always something to cheer for on Dennis's team. So that's I want to be that guy. That's kind of cool to be there.
You are teaming up this year with a 500 winner, Ryan Hunter-Reay, who won 10 years ago today, actually.
Yeah.
What these 2 weeks teaming up with Ryan, I know you guys obviously were together for the open test back in April, but what has it been like getting to know Ryan a little bit better, work a little bit more closely with him, and try to pick his brain and use his experience to augment yours that you have to try to put together a race-winning team this year?
Well, I think Ryan gets it. I mean, he's someone who knows what he wants to win, and I think he knows that I know how to drive, and I know that he knows how to drive. So it's kind of something that we both understand. I think how to get better and like how what we want, and like both of our styles are kind of similar. So we've been able to effectively communicate what we want out of it, and so I think that's helpful. So you know, I feel like again this month has just gone by so fast. It barely even feels like we've been on the track, which is kind of a shame. Because we're just now kind of like hitting our stride of like, okay, I think we know what we want to get to the next step. So yeah, so he's already had that step with the team, but I'm now kind of getting to that point where I think he might have been, you know, before the race last year. So it is what it is. I think we both have good cars. I think Dennis believes we have good cars, and you know, we just have to be smart today and try to take it to the big ones, the big teams.
Yeah. What has this experience been like for you? I know it's been several years since you weren't a full-time driver coming into this race. This is your first IndyCar race of 2024. Does this feel any different? Has your preparation been different? Does kind of just your general vibe coming in different than the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, it's awesome to be here, but it's also like, man, it's just like crazy that we're just already here and like this is the race. You know what I mean? It just feels a bit different overall. It doesn't demean anything from the specialty of this race and this day. It's amazing. But like for me, like I'm a competitive person. I want to be the best that I can be, and you know, this team's given me that opportunity to be the best that I can be. But it's also a group that's such an amazing group that you're like, well, I wish we could go at it again next Sunday. You know what I mean? So. That's the difficult part of this sport that we play, but you know, I can't complain about being a part of this group. It's an amazing group of people, and you know, I hope we can do a lot more together in the future.
I want to ask you about your racing boots. I know with your boots and your helmet, you brought out a little bit of a Jeff Gordon flair for this year with Jeff being here for Kyle Larson's double. How do you go about that process with your special gloves and boots and helmet leading up to the race to decide what to showcase and celebrate each year?
Well, you just got to be a little bit different. You just got to do something that makes an impact, and I think there's a lot of us in this paddock, a lot of drivers in this paddock that just don't. I don't know if they just don't care, or like it's not that hard to just like do something cool, like, and that might attract more attention to the sport than it does normally. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for our partners. I think it's important for you know, like Sparko loves it, and Sparko helps me out a lot, you know, and that's important. Why not just enjoy what you're doing, and maybe like it does not take away from you doing your job to have like cool shoes. Like it's just like literally takes 5 minutes to think about with your painter, like, oh, this could be cool, so we're gonna do something cool, and like and fans enjoy it. So so I haven't got to see Jeff yet, which is
I was going to ask you if you'd gotten a chance to maybe get a signature on those.
I was going to text him this morning, but then I was like, I probably shouldn't do that. So, if I see him, I'll carry a Sharpie with me, and maybe he can just inscribe his name on my shoes before the race.
We don't have drivers asking for autographs too much around this place, but I feel like that would be a fair opportunity where that would make some sense.
I did have Julian Edelman sign my shoes before the Long Beach Grand Prix in 2017, which is kind of cool. So like it's not impossible, and I have those shoes in my house, and it's kind of cool. Be like, yeah, Julian Edelman signed those before the race. I'm like, man, if Jeff Gordon signed these before the race, it's kind of unique.
Very cool.
I know this isn't your first rodeo. I'm glad you mentioned Edelman. I know you got your podcast, but the idea of 350,000 fans being here, do you get more stressed about that, or when you're like on your Twitch stream, your podcast, like what makes you more
I feel more comfortable doing this, honestly, because it's because I don't it's just this is my natural habitat, whereas like when you're talking about racing, you're going to have your takes and you're going to have your opinions on things, and boy, do people not like that sometimes. So that's the funniest part about it, but this is truly where I'm comfortable. I like being out here, and I like shutting the visor and not having to use my voice other than to say what I want in the car. Like, hey, I'll take some more front wing.
Fair. Well, we appreciate you joining us here this morning. I know you've got a little work to do from toward the back of the field, but hopefully we get 200 laps in, and hopefully you're able to make some moves and get up there as you have these last couple years and factor into that finish.
Oh yeah, we'll be all right. We'll be under the radar. We'll sneak our way in there, and then you'll be like, wait, why is this car in the top 5 with 20 to go? That'll be us.
That'll be awesome. Well,
Thank
thanks.
you, man.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks for
one.
joining us.
Thank you, guys.
What a cool guy.
He's really, really neat. He's down to earth. He's one of these few guys that actually has grown up in Indiana, so he has that special connection to this race that not too many guys in this field have, and that's, I think, just makes this day extra special. And I think all these guys in the field, once you've done it a time or two, know what winning the 500 would mean, but I think he's just got a little bit better sense of the immensity of all of it, probably.
Yeah. Well, before we had a few of our guests, I was asking you your fastest speeding ticket. So I want to bring that video up. The other day for Media Day, I was talking to drivers, and I wanted to ask them, what's the fastest speeding ticket you've ever gotten, and did you think you could outrun the police? So I want to share that with y'all, so here's what they had to say. What's the fastest speeding ticket you've ever gotten, and did you think you could outrun the police?
I could definitely outrun the police. I would never attempt to.
I've only had one speeding ticket, and I think it was like, I don't know, maybe like 80 and a 65 on the freeway.
I don't know if I could outrun a helicopter, though, so that wouldn't be fun.
When I drive on the road, I drive like, a grandma. I don't need to drive fast on the road. I leave that for the track.
My rookie year, I had my mom in the car, and I just left this rookie banquet here, and I had like 6 trophies on the back. And he pulled me over for like 122, trying to get to the airplane, and he was very, very mad until he knew who I was, and then he wanted a picture, so it worked out good.
Do I think I could outrun the cops? It depends what car I have, but definitely, yeah.
I never got a speeding ticket.
So what's your normal day-to-day car?
Acura MDX, which is probably a little too big to outrun the cops, but if you give me an IndyCar, I mean, you're outrunning everything. Even if they bring helicopters, you're outrunning it.
I know. I've been very safe. It's keeping my insurance costs down and stuff. So you got to think that you get your first ticket, the insurance goes like double. So never got a speeding ticket before, luckily.
What is the fastest speeding ticket you've ever gotten?
Oh, don't go there. Oh, wow. Here we go. Let's say the 3 digits. I unfortunately was on that one.
I am not a drive fast on the roads guy. I like getting paid to drive fast and not giving money away when I drive fast. So that's usually probably the better route to go. I haven't had a speeding ticket in 7 years, so I am going to keep that streak alive for now.
I'm a bad boy, yes.
I'm not gonna lie, Nathan, it surprised me a little bit. They're driving like a grandma. Yeah, I would think they'd go a little bit faster, but we appreciated the honesty. Before we have our next guest on, I do want to ask you, Kyle Larson, his plans. Yeah. We're about to have the Aero McLaren team principal here, Gavin Ward, on with us, but update us here.
Yeah, so as we were watching that video, just got a message from a team source there over at Aero McLaren. As we mentioned earlier in today's video, really curious to see what Kyle decides to do. My indication is that Kyle will indeed stay and run the Indy 500 today with the weather snafu that we're likely going to get into. Sounds like he's going to forego running the Coke 600 and stay here and run the Indy 500. There's no way with this weather that we're expecting he'd be able to do both anymore, and it does sound like Rick Hendrick has given the team the green light to keep Kyle here and run the 500 and make his debut. So likely won't be doing the double unless I guess that race in Charlotte gets rained out as well, which is unfortunate, but will also be really exciting to see how Kyle can perform from 5th place here today in the 500.
Especially exciting for Hoosier fans. Yeah. Sorry, Charlotte, but wow, big news there. And hopefully Gavin can give us a little bit of insight too as well. We're waiting on him here for a second, but got tons of fans out here right now. I'm not gonna lie. Looking at the sky, it's not looking too good up there.
It's kind of hair more gray than when we sat down. I feel like it's kind of hard to tell from underneath this tent. It is a shame that we can't get started, but I know like when we talked to Doug this morning, he said that they might have been able to start maybe a half an hour earlier, but when you have this specific TV window, you can only move things so much. I think their TV window actually starts at 11 a.m., but they have the pre-race show that NBC has to get through. You have fans that are planning their day around a 12:45 start time, so there's only so much that you can push things forward. And then when you get into really serious weather conditions with lightning like we're expecting, Doug was essentially telling us that he didn't want to rush people here and then have them worried about weather. So that's kind of where we got to today, where we're waiting to see the next updates from Doug in the media center here shortly. But before we get to that, we are joined.
Gavin Ward, hello, sir. Hi. Good morning.
How we doing?
We're doing well. Maybe the question is, how are you doing?
Tip top. Tip top.
How are the nerves? Just like the unpredictability of today. We were just talking about weather things right now. What's the mindset as a team principal, knowing that we have a lot of uncertainties juggling right now?
You got to focus on what you can control at the end of the day, and try as we might, we can't control the weather.
Yes, that's true.
But what I told everybody this morning is, look, we've got 4 great race cars, we've got 4 badass drivers, we got great crews, the whole lot, and whenever we get to race, I'm pretty confident we'll be in the mix. So.
Yeah. Thinking about this being a relatively new role for you, team principal, how big of a win would it be for you today?
Oh, it'd be huge. It'd be the biggest moment of my career, without a doubt. Yeah. And I've been lucky to have some good moments.
You have. You've been with Red Bull in Formula One for several years. You've been with Team Penske for an IndyCar championship and several wins. What have you guys put in, or what's with 4 cars, some experience under your belt this year? How more comfortable do you feel in this role rather than last year when you were taking a big step up compared to being the director of trackside engineering?
Oh yeah, the learning curve has been about that steep.
Fun.
So definitely learned a lot, and just saying that to some people just before coming over here is just really proud of where the team's at. Much more to come. Maybe today will be our day. And if it isn't, that's all right. We keep working on making a better race team.
Yeah. You were on the stand last year when it looked like you guys might have any one of 2 or 3 drivers win this race. Ultimately, Alexander Rossi is your best finishing driver in 5th. When the race is in the final stint, you guys don't have any more stops to make. It is really in the driver's hands. What are those moments like for you as a team principal, wanting so badly for guys to carve their way to the front and win, and knowing that the team has done everything they can, and now it's just kind of up to fate and what the drivers can do?
Yeah, I think even in those instances, I still think we've got a role the team can play. You've still got the radio. You can still help manage the driver's psychology. And I think also what you've put in up to that point on, the driver's side also plays a role. So the environment you create for your drivers. So I don't take a fully hands-off, it's just up to them approach from there, although it's limited what you can do at that point. You just kind of rely on what you've done already. I won't lie, last year was one of the harder days to accept in my career. Now, having said that, when you have a day like that, you can take quite a lot of consolation in the fact that at the end of the day, everyone was safe. Everyone got to come home from the race and go to bed at night and see their family. So it could always be a lot worse. But for sure, as someone who preaches a focus on the process and a healthy detachment from results, because just as you explained, sometimes it's out of your hands. Mm-hmm. You can do the best job, and the dice might not roll your way. And I think living the highs and lows of the roller coaster that can be motor racing, take our Saturday qualifying, for example, can be pretty unhealthy. So you need to have the right level of detachment, although you still need to care. And I struggled to practice what I preached last year, but we got through it, and it was a learning experience. But today I feel good.
As you mentioned, Saturday 2 weekends ago, there was a moment in time where 27 cars had times on the scoring pylon. Everyone had gotten their chance to go through, and you guys didn't have a single time up there, and yet you guys start with 3 cars in the first 3 rows. I think that's like a perfect example of not getting too panicked, not letting emotions take over, and just letting things play out and see what you guys can execute on ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's funny. Everyone's like, "Oh man, you must be so stressed out. You guys must have been so stressed out." And it's like, actually, the stress level was pretty low at that point. It would have been more stressful had the weather been sketchy.
True.
Giving up your guaranteed attempt is not something to take too lightly on some days. But that day particularly, I was pretty confident we'd get. It's like all we had to do was get one clean run. Mm-hmm. Our cars are good enough. It's going to be fine.
When you look at weather today as a team principal on the timing stand, I think we're hopeful, and I guess maybe I'll ask you about this, depending on what information and intel that you guys have gotten, but it looks like hopefully once we get running, maybe around 4:30 or 5, we'll be able to have a 3-ish hour window to get a full race in. But say the rain is coming in and it looks like we're going to cut things off at an uncertain time. How does that change how you guys call strategy? Do you guys maybe roll the dice on a car or two to go off strategy to put yourself in a place where you guys have lots of different scenarios covered? How have you guys kind of talked through that in your head?
Yeah, it's a super tricky one. Obviously, in the day you want to be leading when that caution comes out for conditions. Especially if you're past that 101 lap mark.
Yeah.
But how much can you really play that prediction game? I think we've talked through a few scenarios. I think it's going to be game time, a little bit based on track position. Mm-hmm. Definitely want to be clear on our communication so that our drivers are well informed of what's going on. And then we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I really hope, for the fans' sake and for our sake and for everyone's sake, we get a full race, because I think that we play this one out to 200 laps. I like our chances. Mm-hmm. Hope it's not coming down to sort of something like that, gaps in a pit exchange, etc. But we've got a few more hours to worry about all the permutations. So
that's fair. You guys might even have a few more hours to plan than we were originally thinking. I know we need to let you go here soon, but before we do, this double for Kyle Larson, or just having Kyle Larson be here at IMS, potentially make his 500 debut. It's been 16 months in the making. I was thinking about that the other day. The announcement came out in January of 2023. You had only just been promoted to your current role. Is it weird to think that we've had all this, the 16-month lead up, and now today's the day where this is all happening? Does it seem like it's flown by? Has it taken a while? What's it been like for you to get to this point with Kyle?
Well, I think it's been such a luxury to have that build up, because I don't think we could have done anything much more in terms of trying to plan this out to set that crew and Kyle up for success any better. Whether it was getting to do our rookie orientation program here last fall, running Kyle at Phoenix, do short oval work and get a feel for the car under more grip limited conditions. The simulator work, the sort of knowledge exchange between us and Hendrick, attending NASCAR Cup races, having their guys come to our races, and just all of that has really been a great process and a luxury to try and do this right. Also, I must say, Mr. H's enthusiasm for this program, and there's a reason that race team's been as successful as it has been. It's one of the best in the world, without a doubt. And you can see just how big a deal this is, and how important it is to him that we do this right. And I think that just isn't. We were motivated without that, but it adds another level. So yeah, no, it's fun to finally get to race day, see what the weather brings. But I think to me, this is the biggest story in motor racing right now. Certainly in North America,
absolutely,
possibly the world. The enthusiasm is unbelievable. I think it was going to be unbelievable, but then that level of competitiveness that Kyle's had just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
So even Zach Brown called me up the other day after his press conference he did with Mr. H, and he's like, I didn't realize quite how big a deal this is.
And Zach does lots of
it. And if Zach thinks it's a big deal, it's probably a pretty big deal.
We were just talking before you came on about Mr. H, and talking earlier this week about how hard it would be to pull Kyle from this race to go to Charlotte for the Coke 600 and his NASCAR obligations there. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I have since learned this morning that it does sound like Kyle will likely stay, knowing the weather conditions that we have. Kyle will likely stay to do the 500 if we get rolling at 4:30 or 5. What do you know right now, and how will that decision kind of be played out?
Yeah, I mean, Hendrick guys are committed for Larson to try and get this in however possible. I think the permutations where it doesn't happen would be pretty limited and pretty unfortunate. So now we've planned for it, but pretty excited about getting racing whenever we do.
Cool. Well, we thank you so much for joining us, Gavin.
Yes, sir.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot.
Good luck
Thank
with
you.
everything.
Yep. Good luck today.
Meeting you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
No worries.
All right, guys. That was our lineup of guests today.
Yeah.
What a good lineup.
I know. It was really fun.
Liked it.
It's always really fun getting these groups together. You send out a flurry of text messages and emails to team PR folks. You don't know always who you're going to hear back from. There's some guests like Marcus, for example, who came on in 2022 for the first time. He won the race, and the next year said he wanted to keep coming back every single year. So he's been on each of the last 3 years now, including this year. It's fun to get to talk to these guys in the element as the emotions and pressures are ramping up. Obviously, we're thinking we have maybe a little bit more time until the green flag drops today, but still really awesome to get to talk to all of our guests today.
I know. It's gone by so quickly. I feel like if I had to put into words today, crazy, insane, but super fun. A few days ago, I asked drivers, could you explain the Indianapolis 500 in one sentence for me? And here's what they had to say. For people who have never experienced the Indy 500, how would you explain it in one sentence?
The greatest party in the world, and something that you probably can't even begin to comprehend until you see it.
The catchphrase is the greatest spectacle in racing, and I really do believe that, because you're talking about 300,000 live in attendance fans here to watch drivers, 33 of them, go 240 miles an hour.
One sentence? Oh my God, this is a lot of pressure.
The Indy 500 is the biggest race on the planet. That's it. It's the biggest race on the planet. It's unlike any other race that there is, to be honest.
I mean, it's undescribable. I will say, I would describe it as like the greatest spectacle in racing. Very cliche, I know.
I would say you need to come do it for yourself, it's so hard to describe what it's like on race day. You know, it really is one of those things that you just got to see it to believe it.
That's a good question. It's an adrenaline-packed, full speed, crazy experience like that you can't describe unless you've actually been here.
Jeez. Probably a 240 mile per hour circus. It's crazy. A lot of different things happening, but the coolest thing is in person getting to see cars going that fast.
A lot of people, a lot of beer.
All right. Well, Nathan, your expertise, here's where it comes into play here. So I think it's time we break down some of the rows here and chat a little bit about who we think can move up the quickest and all that good stuff. So let's start with row 11.
Yeah, so I'm really interested. We got to talk to him earlier. Really interested to see how Marcus Ericcson fares. He feels like I think he has a good race car, but it's really tough to start that far back. You've got so much dirty air you're dealing with. We start to see guys flirt with potentially getting lapped before you would think, even in a 2.5 mile racetrack. So it's up to guys like Marcus. You see Graham Rahal there on row 11 along with Catherine Legg. It's up to them to make up some positions really quickly. Give yourself a padding to those guys starting at the front and just try to see if you can have some guys make some mistakes. It's really tough to pass this far back in the pack, and so a lot of times drivers say that the best way to pack is to have someone make a mistake. So you just kind of hope, if you're Marcus, if you're Graham, if you're Catherine, and some others on the screen here, that some folks in front of you will make a bobble, will predict someone's move incorrectly and have to either lay off the gas or hit the brakes, and you can weave around them. As Marcus said, he's hoping to be around 17th or so by a lap 100, which sounds both like a lot of positions to make up and maybe not so much. We'll have a couple pit stops in there, so we'll see. Conor Daly, similar way. His teammate Ryan Hunter-Ray is starting in the top 12. I think their driving styles are very different. I think Conor would have started much higher up if he had not had an engine snafu, I guess I would say, during qualifying on Saturday. So I think he's got a lot better. I think he's a lot better driver. I think he's got a lot better car than starting 29th, as we see right there. So those are my two guys to watch there in row 11 and row 10.
I can't imagine having a worse set of cars. 101 laps, they'll call it, but geez, getting that far ahead and that quickly, that sounds like a tough one. But all right, let's go to row 9 and row 8. Let's see these here.
Yeah, it's you mentioned the 101 lap thing. I think that's some of the folks that we've had on have talked a little bit about it, but really interested to see, once we get a better idea of the radar, how if teams are really plotting to running 200 laps running to 101 and just kind of trying to be up front as much as possible. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But as you mentioned, we've got rows 7, 8, and 9 here in front of us. Row 7, I think, is what really stands out. I had it in my preview story, 33 things to know, that you can find on IndyStar.com. This row here, row 7, with Marco Andretti, Elio Castroneves, and Scott Dixon, when you add up the starts that they've had in their collective Indy 500 careers, second most in Indy 500 history. It's somewhere in the 62 range, so average of 20 for each of those drivers. You have 5 combined victories. Marco Andretti started on pole in 2020. This is a row of guys that, if you're looking at someone starting outside the top 15, I think these are 3 guys that we could see really move up and factor in. Elio, as you mentioned earlier in the show, had the second fastest lap time on Carb Day. Scott Dixon had the first fastest. So these guys feel really comfortable with their race cars. They've also been up at the front recently. Marco Andretti, on the other hand, started on pole in 2020, has been really frustrated with his race car these last several years. Ever since then, he didn't actually even lead an official lap in that race. He got passed on lap 1 and fell like a rock backwards. So I'm interested and hopeful in some ways that Marco can have a good race car this year, can factor in whenever you have an Andretti up front at this race, knowing the history of his grandfather Mario, his dad Michael, and other relatives in the Andretti family. This crowd is just different. When you have an Andretti contending, we obviously haven't had an Andretti win this race since 1969. We'll see if Marco can do that today, but I bet you one of these three is up there in the top 5 or 6 once we get to the final 20 laps today.
Right. Oh, all right, here we go. Going up the rows. Let's take 6. Oh.
Yeah.
I
4,
can't
5, and
count.
6.
4,
I know
5,
it.
6. Oh my gosh. All right. What's standing out here for you, Nathan?
2 drivers, again, that we know didn't qualify maybe as well as they had hoped. Alex Palou was on pole a year ago. Colton Herta has started in the middle of the front row before. Both of these guys, though, I think have very good race cars. Starting on row 5 in the 13th and 14th positions. We talked about Joseph Newgarden earlier. He started 17th a year ago, was able to carve himself up to the front and ultimately win this race. Colton Herta starting in 13th, Alex Palou in 14th. I think those are perfect positions for those guys. Ultimately, if this race is short, maybe those guys aren't in the top 2 or 3 when we're getting down the stretch and it's cut off all of a sudden to factor in. If this race goes 200 laps, I think both of those guys, if they can stay out of trouble, if they can have clear pit stops, I think those 2 can be up at the front. I think they're the most likely to, even though you have some experienced guys in Takuma Sato, Ryan Hunter-Reay there in row 4, Kyle Kirkwood, Colton Herta's teammate at Andretti Global. I still think Colton and Alex, among the 9 that we have here on the screen, are the most likely guys to factor in once we get to the end of today's race this afternoon.
1, 2, and 3. Let's do it. There's my counting. Got it that time.
All right. We haven't talked about it a whole lot today, but as you see here, Team Penske locking out the front row. Scott McLaughlin, his first pole here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He hasn't started and he hasn't finished better than 14th in 3 previous starts here at the 500. Team Penske, of course, won last year in 2023. Before that, they hadn't won this race since 2019. We've had winners come off the front row nearly 50% of the time. I think 45 of the 107 runnings here. So Roger Penske has a really great shot when you think of where his drivers are, the experience that they have, and Joseph and Will being former winners here recently. Scott feels a little like a driver of fate in some ways. He's had a fast car in practice. He beats his teammates in qualifying on Sunday in the Fast 6. He has a really interesting storyline, and having that 2019 Team Penske 500 winner Simon Pagenaud on his pit stand. He's been working with Simon kind of behind the scenes ever since February to work Simon back into IndyCar. As you guys may know who are watching this, Simon was running full-time last year, had a nasty crash at Mid-Ohio with Meyer Shank Racing, and has not been back at an IndyCar track or at an IndyCar race since. So this was a great way to work Simon back into the fold, something that Simon was eager to do when Scott asked him to help him out. Scott essentially just wanted some advice. He, as I mentioned earlier, has had some really tough introduction to the 500 in his first 3 years here. He asked a former teammate of his, someone who's really methodical, takes copious amounts of notes. I think he'd run a dozen 500s here. Simon had essentially just said, I need some help. And it wasn't as much on track as much as off track. The mental preparation, the planning, thinking about what you want to accomplish every single day on track during practice, and kind of just the flow of the month. Scott is one of those drivers that feels a little like a driver of destiny, and as Greg was talking to us about earlier, it's hard not to pick with your heart. I've made obviously picks for every single 500 I've been here. I haven't been remotely close of landing any of my picks from 2020 to 2023. So we'll go into those later on here to talk about who we think's going to win this race. My driver I picked was up on that screen. I think Scott is would be a fun winner here. He'd be a first timer. I think he would celebrate incredibly well. His team is called the Thirsty Threes, both because of how thirsty they are for victories, but also how well they party off track.
Seriously?
Yeah. He's got Did
he say his drink of choice?
I don't know what it is. He would be. I'm sure he'd be drinking champagne tonight to celebrate. He's got a really cool T-shirt that the folks at the shop put together with Scott and his team. It's out. They have a truck out in the fan zone area. It's actually a big 3 with the cork of a champagne bottle popping off.
Oh my gosh!
So really, really cool.
I love it.
Yeah. So we'll see if that Team Penske trio can pull it off. It would be an immense storyline. It would be Roger Penske's 20th
Absolutely.
500 victory here. He has 19 so far. But I think there's also a great chance that someone outside of Team Penske, folks that we had on the screen there earlier, Alexander Rossi, potentially. I don't know if Kyle Larson has what it takes to know how to battle with these cars over the final 10 to 15 laps to win this race. Oftentimes drivers talk about needing a couple races to just kind of figure out how to chart that out. But I definitely think we could have one of those 9 there that we just had on the screen win this race.
Yeah, he mentioned, I believe he ended up 13th in practice. He mentioned it was a little bit of an adjustment for him, but you did also mention prediction. So I want plan A, plan B. So say the race only gets cut in half.
Okay.
Who are you picking? And if you get the full 200 laps, who's your top dude?
All right.
Or dudette?
Sure. So I know my initial pick when we ran our picks in IndyStar.com. We have our special section in the print paper this morning. If you got a chance to grab one of those, I encourage you to do so. So my first, second, and third, first place, Joseph Newgarden, be a repeat winner, our first repeat winner in more than 2 decades. Fun note, he would get a $440,000 bonus from Borg Warner that they have been building. It's essentially a pool that's been building $20,000 every single year. They've been doing it since 1995. Elio Castroneves got a smaller amount than that when he went back-to-back in 2001 and 2002, but it's been building ever since then. Started at $20,000, I think, in 2003. They've been adding $20,000 since, so we're now 22 years in, and we'll see if Joseph can get that. My second place driver, Colton Herta. As I mentioned earlier, I think he's got a great race car. He's not starting too far back, and I think he's got what it takes to factor into this race. He really hasn't in his career that started in 2019. He's had a couple years where he started up at the front in the top 5, but hasn't really been one of those drivers that we've been watching down the stretch, and I think after some years of experience, maybe a little bit of a refocus this offseason and how he approaches his career and his craft in general, I think Colton could factor into things. And then Scott McLaughlin, as I mentioned, great story. Certainly think he could win this race. Ultimately, we see so rarely that the fastest car wins this race. I can't tell you how it's going to happen. It still may happen for Scott, but more likely than not, it seems like nowadays, the guy with the fastest car doesn't win this race, whether it's a pit stop, whether it's a yellow that comes at the wrong time, whether it's just getting past at the end. You get in the wrong place. We saw it with Marcus Ericcson last year. He was leading on the last lap, which ironically is not where you want to be with these cars, where second place can pass first place so easily, and it's all about timing and a little bit of luck. So ultimately, I feel like Scott can factor in, but when I was making my picks earlier this week, he was not the guy I went with. So how about you? This is your first 500. You were at Carb Day on Friday, kind of looking at how things have gone in practice and qualifying. Who are your picks for winning this race here today?
I'm not going to lie, you picked my guy, Joseph Newgarden. I like him. He's so nice. I think it'd be really cool to see him do it back-to-back like you mentioned. To be honest, he was like just the guy that I want to win. I didn't have like a plan B. Say they do in this race early. Who are you picking?
I'm going to take a different driver out of that Team Penske contingent. Will Power. Will has won this race in 2018. He's been close a handful of times before that. Hasn't been very much of a factor, but he's really on his game this year. I think this will be his 4th race of this year, starting second. He's been so close on so many polls. He has been so close on a handful of wins. He's been on the podium a handful of times already this year. And I just think he's at the top of his game. He won a championship in 2022. This Team Penske team is so great on strategy. With having 3 guys at the top, I think they have a little bit of freedom. If things get a little iffy with weather coming sooner than 200 laps, I would be surprised if they didn't kind of put some guys on some different strategies. And I think Will is a great, calm, collected guy that in a weird situation could figure out a way to both have luck fall his way and put his car at the right position at the right time.
Yeah.
He's working with some great people on his timing stand. His engineer, Dave Faustino, has been with him throughout basically his whole career. Excited to see what Will can do today, and I feel like if things get shaken up a little bit, I think he's a guy that could factor in that way.
I know. But experience does matter too, though.
Absolutely.
Experience absolutely matters. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know if I got a sweat droplet, someone spit on me, but I feel like I may have felt a little something.
The wind definitely feels like it's picked up here over the
Yeah.
last half an hour. Again, we're sitting under an umbrella. It still looks just a little hazy as the fans have been filing in. Certainly feels a lot more full than we started at 8:30 an hour and a half ago. But I know Doug, when we spoke to him at 6:20 this morning, he said the rain was likely to come somewhere from noon to 1, but he also warned that there could be some rain showers that came before the heavy stuff, before the thunder, the gusts of wind that could reach maybe 50, 60 miles an hour, before the lightning, of course. And so we'll see over this next half an hour or so if we start to get some rain droplets. I think we are going to get, if we haven't already, an update soon from the folks in the media center. Doug Boles would likely be the one giving that update. He said this morning 9:30, 10 o'clock would likely be that time frame. He said with us earlier that 9:30, 9:45 would likely be where they would make those final decisions and then get them to us here fairly quickly. So I think we will have an answer here very soon. It seems like as I've been talking, even this wind is picking up.
I know.
So unfortunately, things might be starting to get a little iffy. Hope we haven't been able to watch a radar, but hope you guys out there who are watching have been following along, have a good sense of where the weather is, what it's going to be doing. Make good choices. I know it's a great place to be. I know you love sitting in the stands, just enjoying what you're eating, enjoying what you're drinking, enjoying being with the people that you're with. But at the same time, hope everyone stays really safe. Plan ahead. When we get this race going here, eventually they'll have plenty of heads up. You will be able to get back in your seats. Even if you're still at home right now, you'll be able to get here, get parked, get to your seats before we get rolling here this afternoon.
Yeah, and I know we didn't get much time with Gavin to chat about it, but Kyle Larson, if he does end up staying and racing, I believe it's 30 points ahead of everyone else in the rankings right now. So if he doesn't go to the Coca-Cola 600, is that going to have any effect on his placement moving forward?
I think some of the bigger concerns, and I don't follow NASCAR day to day. My day-to-day job is covering and following IndyCar, but I know that some of the important things that drivers talk about, it just being present at races, is getting points for where you finish in the stages. And those points then carry over to the playoffs, the cushion that you have as they eliminate three drivers every single round. So we'll see, if he races here, he will miss that. He will also, I think, as we mentioned earlier, he'll have to get a waiver from NASCAR in order to be eligible for the playoffs. He has won a couple races already this year, but NASCAR requires both the teams with the car to run as well as the drivers to run every single race. And so if he does, as I reported earlier, stay and run the Indy 500, misses the Coca-Cola 600 this evening, it's scheduled to start at 6 p.m. This race, I think, is likely not to start until 4:30 or 5 if the radar stays as we have seen. There's no he's getting to Charlotte unless that race also is postponed due to weather, and we haven't heard as much about the folks in Charlotte, North Carolina being affected by the weather that we're dealing with here today. So that's what he'll have to do. A lot of folks there, Bob Pockrass, a reporter from Fox Sports, has talked about thinking that it's super likely that NASCAR will grant him that waiver to be playoff eligible even though he misses the race today. So I think we'll hear about that within due time. NASCAR wasn't going to give him that green light and that go-ahead ultimately because they want him there. He's a full-time NASCAR driver. He's the points leader right now. He's a 2021 Cup champ. He's one of the most popular drivers in that series. So you don't want, if you're NASCAR, to give Kyle the green light to admit that the 500 is the bigger thing to be doing.
He
even
chose
though
the 500 over us.
Even though I think we all know the 500 is a bigger deal than the Coke 600. As big of a deal as that is in the 3 major races that we have across the calendar today, the first being the Monaco Grand Prix for Formula One, then we, of course, transition to the 500. But running the 500, especially as a full-time NASCAR driver, as someone who, we haven't had a full-time NASCAR driver do this in 10 years, it's just a bigger deal. And I don't think anyone in the NASCAR world will blame Kyle, will blame Jeff Gordon, will blame Rick Hendrick if that ultimately is, as I believe is, their decision today.
Yeah. Well, surely the weather has not stopped people from coming out. I'm sure everyone out there watching has seen all of our friends back here throwing up the deuces, saying hello. But I want to ask you, so how many of these have you actually been to covering? Because you mentioned 95 or 90. What did you say, 95?
No, so my first 200 was 2002. I was 10 years old. I came with my parents. My dad has been coming since the early to mid 80s. So he fell in love with the 500. He grew up in Anderson. He went to Ball State. He and my mom met at Ball State and since stayed in Indy. And he's been coming to the 500 for about 40 years now, I think, without a missed race. So I came often as a kid. 2002 for about 5 or 6 years straight. I started missing a couple here and there because it conflicted with high school graduation parties, actually, oddly enough. Dare you. So I graduated from Noblesville High School in 2010. I had some really great friends of mine who were a year or a couple years ahead of me, and so ultimately there were a couple years there that I missed to be able to go and celebrate them for graduating, and then missed a couple years being in college, having internships, being out of town for the 500. I came back, I think, after I graduated in 2014, was I think also here in 2013 as well, and then I moved away and didn't come back to work and cover the race until 2020, which was the weird one where there were no fans in the stands. So you see all these hundreds of thousands of people here. This race was held in August for the first time. The first time it was held outside in May, and the 100 and some runnings that we'd had up to that point, and there were no fans in the grandstands. It was an eerie moment, as weird and as awesome and as electric as this atmosphere is today. That was probably the most unique sporting experiences I've had in my life. And then we had 135,000 fans in 2021. Gates fully opened in 2022, and then, of course, was here last year and this year as well.
Yeah, I remember growing up. Most of my friends were like, you have to at least go to the Snake Pit, go to the concerts, go to the tailgate. And I got to go yesterday, or the day before yesterday, to go hang out with friends. It was madness, absolute madness out there. And I am curious, did you hear anything about what might happen to the concert if weather does come? Are they going to completely cancel it? Are they going to delay that as well?
Yeah, so I think it will ultimately depend on when we get lightning versus if we just have rain. It does look like lightning is coming even with this first wave of storms. So as Doug mentioned, when these storms are approaching, they're going to warn fans far in advance. This is not going to be like your son or daughter's rec soccer game where when you have lightning within 8 miles, that's when they call things off. They tell people to go to their cars, wait around. You have like the 30-minute delays. That's not how IMS is going to operate today. They're going to look at the forecast, and when things are getting closer and they can for certain know that lightning is coming in this batch of storms. Doug said this morning, I think around 50 miles, when this storm is about 50 miles away and they know that there's lightning with it, they are going to be telling fans to evacuate the stands. So that means either going back to your car if you parked in the infield, if you parked relatively close. That essentially gives folks enough time to get to a safe spot, whether it's underneath the grandstands, whether it's in their cars, whether it's just staying at home. There's still some fans that maybe are on the way here where it's just after 10 o'clock right now. So we're still 2.5 hours before the scheduled green flag. There are still a handful of people that are rolling up, maybe still at their homes if they live really close. So we'll see.
Here.
We do have an update. It is raining in Terre Haute. We have a funny joke for those fans and folks that cover this race. When you look at bands of storms coming through, ultimately a great sign is when there is a window over Terre Haute. For whatever reason, the way the storm patterns move through, if there's not a storm hitting Terre Haute, we hope, and it's oftentimes proven true that nothing's going to hit IMS. So it is raining in Terre Haute. I imagine we're going to be getting hit here probably within the hour. Maybe we get 90 minutes, but it does look like things are coming our way here soon.
I don't, oh my God! Hope you guys brought your umbrella, all the rain gear. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I hope it. Maybe this year Terre Haute is doesn't have much to do with this.
Still, we never know. I mean, we talked. There have been years in the past. 2019 is a great example where Doug said as late in the morning as like 9 or 10 a.m. they were standing on the yard of bricks saying that there was 100% chance that this race was not going to get run.
Yep.
So we're still at that time frame right now. So the storm could dissipate. Still has a good amount of time before it gets to us. We don't think that's the case. And again, I think in 2019 there was more of a band of rain where you could have some spotty showers that break up. Whereas this does look like it's a severe. I mean, our video guy Clark was just flashing us the radar, and it looks yellow, orange, maybe even some red. Typically,
major red. We're getting head shakes
so
of major red.
Those things don't typically break up an hour or so from hitting you. So I think the bright side is, as Doug mentioned this morning, we're going to get some racing in at some point. That's the thing to hold on to. I don't think this is going to be a situation where folks that came here from across the country, across the world even, are going to, if you have a flight booked for Monday morning where you're not going to be able to watch any racing. I think we're even going to probably crown a champion today. And so you just hope that we get 200 laps in, that it's the full race distance, and that it's not a little bit of a fluky experience like we had in 2004 and 2007 where they cut the race short of 200 laps, and then you have someone that's leading the race that might not have been leading 40, 50, 60 laps later happens to win the race because of where they were at the right time.
Yeah. Our friend Doug mentioned sunset. Is that the latest that they'll what's the latest they would cap the race
I think that's around when they were running a NASCAR race. It was the last Brickyard 400. It might have been in 2020 if memory served me right. And they were running until near darkness. We don't have lights here around the track, so you have to kind of rely on how much or little cloud cover we have, and that kind of determines how late we can go. Sunset right now is right about 9 p.m. So I would say if we're clear around then we're probably still good to right around that 8:45 to 9 range. Now I know we have another batch of storms that's coming through maybe as early as 6. Hopefully it's more around that 8-9 p.m. range, and if we get going at 5 o'clock like is predicted, like the weather looks like at the moment, then I think we'll maybe start around 5. You can get that 3-hour window that we need to get the 200 laps in, and hopefully that's where this day ends up. It will be these photos that we take with the winner will be very different to have a dark background.
Right.
I don't know how late they've run before, but to have a winner celebrated at sunset is certainly going to be very different than what we've had in years past.
All right, I want to take a bet here with you. The winner, what milk do you think they're picking? Whoever the winner is. So we both said Joseph Newgarden. Do you know what milk he drank last time?
So I don't know. The funny thing is they actually asked these drivers for like what their preferences are ahead of time. So they actually made those picks a week or maybe even a month ago, and so then that way they can have the right kind of milk on the podium for the drivers ready.
33 different types of milks. Is it sacrilegious to ask for oat milk or almond milk?
Yeah, so they essentially limit it to, I think their 3 options are skim milk, 2% milk, and whole milk. So those are the 3 options. I think it's the American Dairy Association that essentially sponsors that idea, that tradition that we have here at the 500. And so they, of course, prefer that the drivers drink cow milk. And so oat milk, almond milk, other types of milk. Chocolate milk even is not an option, unfortunately. I know there are folks that love that. And as you mentioned earlier, butter is actually the original milk that was drank years and years ago. Buttermilk, though, is very different that we drink now compared to what it was
Gotcha.
back in the 30s and 40s when that originally started. So that's why we don't have folks that drink buttermilk today on the podium.
Who was it that had orange juice one year? Was it Elio?
Yeah, so that was Emerson Fittipaldi when he
Emerson.
won back in the 90s. He talked about wanting to have orange juice. I do think he eventually drank milk, if memory serves me right, but said up there that he really wanted and might have actually even had orange juice. But I think someone, if memory serves me right again, got him
Orange
to.
Farm or something like that?
Yeah, he had some connections to that in his family, and so I think that was maybe a little inside joke that he was giving there. So that's one of the most recent interesting takes that we've had on the history of drinking and dousing yourself in milk.
I don't even know how you could cheer if you're seeing orange juice. I'd be like,
very,
come on, bruv.
Very,
Come
very
on,
different
man.
photo, very different experience if you're chugging milk there versus orange juice. We got an update there from folks behind the scenes. It does sound like we're going to get an update on the race here at 10:45, so about a half an hour from now. And so we'll be very interested to see where we get from that. And I guess that's where we'll leave things.
Yeah, so to all of our YouTube friends, Facebook friends, IndyStar.com fans, we truly appreciate y'all joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the interviews as much as us. Hopefully you got your picks in. Hopefully you got an umbrella, rain jacket, all the good stuff. From me and Nathan here at the track, we appreciate y'all and enjoy race day.